it's sort of fun to ponder about primitivity because it's the only good indicator of objectivity along with emotions. But the good thing is about primitivity is the fact that it sort of gives emotions its flavor, you know. Primitivity breeds enjoyment, you know, and theoretical approach breeds disenjoyment, you know. The more you read, the unhappier you become, you know. The fascinating thing about this sort of quasi religious divine animals and vegetable vegetable beings, you know, is the fact that they sort of terve. Joo, terve vaan. Ei tässä, ei tässä mitään erikoista. Mulla oli tässä jutut kesken, niin soitellaanko sitten huomenna? No niin, heippa. Jep, heippa. Joo, hei. One of the things that one should figure out when trying to make these metal statue organisms is first of all, if you create them, do you put muddy water and bacterial water within them? And if you do, does it produce bacteria in a continual loop? And if it does it create electrolytes and protons and electrons? And if it does it enhance the flow of electricity, since the statue organism is made of metal, you know? If the answer to all these things is yes, then it's in theory doable. One of the things you should think about, whether or not all metal objects and all metal electronic objects should be amplified to the aforementioned technique, or should something be left out of the technique, you know? Then you should, in theory, ponder how to sort of figure out the sort of hierarchical structure of the ones who do not let you give you access to the special class outside world beings, you know. And by special class I mean something of something that is more rogue and more of hierarchical value than the sort of ideologies of the royals, you know. Once you have figured that out, then you have to figure the stanza of the sort of animal and vegetable people. Once you have that figured out and can see the different forms of the hierarchical structure, you will still need to sort of figure out how to not be pre-stigmatized by them, and it's sort of difficult once it happens in a continuous fucking flow. And the thing is, I feel as though the only sort of solution to this sort of aspect of problems is sort of some sort of form of special class autocracy, automationcracy, machinocracy, or something that is sort of maybe some sort of working class technocracy. It's in they are all sort of in theory the same thing. All the forms of government that I just aforementioned, in theory they are all the same thing. It's automationcracy, autocracy, machinocracy, technocracy. They are all, and I don't necessarily see them as a bad thing. I see them as a sort of open door. But they they tend to sort of undervalue the primitivity over the intellectual forms of reason. But if you could have some sort of working class style technology, environmentalist, machinocratic, um, automationcratic, uh, um, form of government that favors primitivity as an utility form to help the environment. That would be the ideal counter to the sort of religious dogmatization. But the but the sort of stanza of it is very difficult to create, you know. It requires a lot of thinking. It requires a lot of interdependence. It requires a lot of social primitivity as an utility, and it requires a lot of sort of it requires a lot of forms of socially social kind of intellectual hybrid manifest type of social service work, you know. And I feel as though Ayn Rand and Martin Luther in Germany in the Middle Ages did a lot of the sort of social stanza work in which the sort of utility of primitivity took place, you know. Not necessarily with Ayn Rand's philosophical work because she favored reason, you know. She was an theoretical intellectual in a sense, whereas I'm more of an primitive philosopher for primitivity, you know. I like to keep things concrete, you know. That's why I said emotions are the objective indicator of existence, you know. And the sort of thing about the intellectual framework of my ideas is the fact that I don't think of them as sort of ideas, you know. I think of them as primitive emotions, you know. And the fascinating thing about the hierarchical framework of framework and outlook of the sort of how should I put it? The undermining stanza of primitive utility, you know? If you do if you primitively do same thing all over again, it eventually breeds utility, you know? It's an sort of quasi-militaristic stanza in a sense, you know? But the fact that it's militaristic stanza, it doesn't mean that it's a bad stanza, you know?